looking at hybrid technologies and the different approaches that we can take as part of this. And so we want to think about, how we're helping to utilize some of that investment that's going on. And a big part of this is AI, right, in my mind. So there's kind of people, there's the productivity message that we've had ever since the Industrial Revolution. So if you go way back in time, you think through, the Industrial Revolution, this was about productivity. It was about how do we make work go faster. And so the invention of machines, the invention of what we needed from a technology perspective, whether it was a loom or a printing press, all the way through to the computing technologies that we have today. But that's really been about productivity inside of our organizations and thinking through how we can use that. Now, when you get into this kind of new brave world that we're in right now, it's kind of an interesting one for us because I think about this, we've got some great stats in here that help us to understand this kind of intelligent edge and the intelligent cloud. And you might have heard folks at Microsoft talking about this, right? You think about that Azure compute that's powering the experience that we're having right now, right? So somewhere, whether it's on the moon or not, but I think it's right here on Earth, thinking through like the way that the data is being processed right now, how your local device, whether you're on your phone or your PC, is part of that intelligent edge and helping to work on that. And so thinking through like, how is that processing happening? We're bouncing these electrons essentially right through huge pipes to make this happen. And so that we can talk to each other right now and that we can have that live interactive experience. And so for me, it's kind of interesting with that technology, the ubiquitous that we're seeing, the computing that's happening, and that intelligent edge is kind of a connection. We think about it as the devices, but I also think about it as the people, right? It's the people and the devices, the connection working together as part of this. And so when you look at this kind of estimated data growth, you look at how many connected devices we have in the world, especially if you're in a more developing country, right? It's your mobile device is everything, right? That horsepower that, previously took sort of huge rooms. If you think back to, I've got a Saturn V behind me, right? One of the rockets that went to the moon. And so you think about the compute that powered that essentially, and now how that compute, essentially all of that compute and so much more is now packed into our phones. And yet we have even more challenges in the productivity that we have in everyday life. And so I want to think through a little bit more about opportunity, right? So all of this in my mind is a huge opportunity. And whether this is in things like retail, whether you're a small, medium-sized business, whether you're a consultant in this particular area and you're working with M365 productivity technologies, we're thinking about all these different ways that we can use this advancement in technology to help enterprises and organizations basically deliver on the outcomes that they want. Now, there's been some really interesting research that's been going on. It's called The New Future of Work, and I want to draw your attention to it because there's a whole set of new research that came out powered by a lot of the work that Microsoft Research has been doing over the last few years. And so one of the areas that we've been looking at the most is kind of how we think about the AI and AI of the future as part of this. And so there's kind of always been this sequence of AI events, and maybe you think already that it's kind of this huge buzzword. A few years ago it was like big data, everything was big data, and I feel like in the last few years it's been AI, and it's sort of the kind of the view of AI that we have has really come from, I would say Hollywood and science fiction. We've had some crazy things where, hey, the computers are going to take over the world. They're going to, wipe us out of the jobs, and they're going to sort of take over the way that we think about things. But I think about when that comes to actual productivity, what we think about as productivity in our daily jobs, this power of AI really hinges on getting the role right? So how we think about it. And so there's kind of two schools of thought that have been part of this. And so one is thinking about augmentation of our abilities. And so we want to think about human and AI collaboration as being that augmentation piece. So if you look on the side, there's a research paper that's referenced here. Think about that application goal in this case, right? This is about extending our abilities. It's about empowering users, right? It's about trying to make you even do more than you're even capable of right now. And then thinking about how we're looking at human control and oversight as part of that. And so we want that augmentation, right? That sometimes the device feels like an extension of yourself, right? You have that feeling right now with your mobile device, like you can't sort of do stuff without it, right? And so it's kind of a tool and it sits in your hand or wherever you're thinking through, like you're looking at it and you say, hey, this thing, without this device, I can't operate a lot of my daily life. It's really interesting. And so that augmentation that's happening as part of our abilities is really just that piece of AI and how we think about it. Now, the other piece of this is kind of the other side, the left-hand side of this chart in this case. When we think about human AI collaboration, that's one aspect. The other piece of it is when it's human-centric AI. And so that means really putting you as an individual at the center, right? And we're doing some of this in Microsoft Viva, right? We're thinking about as an employee and putting you at the center and all of the things that come around it. But human-centric AI means that I have to actually empower people. It's not about emulating people. And so many of the experiments you've seen in the past, right? We think about bots. We've tried to have things where we've got, virtual representation of ourselves where we're like, hey, this bot is going to answer all these questions on behalf of me. And maybe we've seen some of the experiments that have been out there. You've seen some of the work that's happened, with the evolution, for example, of Cortana, that kind of stuff. And so you've seen that happen, right? But it hasn't been as successful as you might have thought, right? There was this world, 5-10 years ago when we were like, hey, there's just going to be a clone of myself out in the universe, and that person, AI bot is just going to handle these questions for me. And it hasn't worked out that way. And it's really thinking through, like, if we're looking at human-centric AI, which is this is what this is really all about. That human-centric AI is about not emulating a person. It's not trying to take what makes your brain and differentiated experiences together. We want to think too instead about how we're actually helping to augment and empower what you're doing. And so this is a really interesting hinge point for us. And so I think of this as kind of that second wave of AI. So we've had all the noise and the bluster and everything else about it. And hey, AI is going to do everything. Well, guess what? It's not doing everything, right? But it can absolutely help in our day-to-day work, in our day-to-day productivity. And it is about augmentation and not about emulation. And it's just a really important piece of work that's happening as part of this. And so you're going to see more and more experiences, I think, go into this area, right, where we're thinking about, how we're helping to empower you, how we're helping to augment what you're doing already. But this augmentation just doesn't happen on, what we think about as collaborative surfaces, right? It really has to go across all of these different areas. And so I think about innovation that's getting powered by AI across all of these different opportunities. And so I look at this, we've got cloud, IoT, edge, AI, digital twins, right? And this is all about that physical representation of the world, thinking through like a digital twin, for example, is kind of recreating a replica, looking at maybe all of the signals that are coming into a certain thing, being able to understand what's happening to that physical device that's out there. We've got AI that's actually helping us with the compute and the intelligence as part of this too. And then we've also got that intelligent edge as part of this as well. There's thinking through, like, how do we help you to look at, IoT devices? How are we connecting the devices into that edge? And all of these are great opportunities when you think through, like, here's all of the different surfaces that we interact with. And so it's not just about that mobile device. It's about the devices that sit in our homes. It's about the devices that sit in our workplaces. It's the devices that sit out in the real world. And so more and more signal growth means more and more compute, more needs essentially for intelligent innovation to happen on top of this, and then to be able to actually process that and make it useful to us, right? So all of these devices generating huge amounts of signals. We as people can't handle that, right? We just can't. We are not able to cognitively process that amount of load. And so we need augmentation. We need empowerment that's coming from AI to help us understand what is the opportunity in that data. How can we make things more efficient and more productive because of it? And so it's a really interesting place that we're at, I think, where, really software is not just driving productivity anymore. It's not just about, hey, I can make the machine spin faster and faster, printing press, looms, cars, right? There's all about how can we just do the same thing but go faster. Software really now is about how we drive differentiation in our businesses. And it's really important to think through that, like, what is that opportunity? Whether you're a small consulting company right now, maybe you're just getting started with M365 collaboration technologies. Maybe you're thinking through, like, how do I grow as a service or a vendor? Maybe you have the only person, that's around in your organization that's in charge of IT, right? Maybe you're that sort of role as well. Or maybe you're developing new products or services. You have a new organization that you're growing as part of that. And so thinking through, like, how we help to enable that really sort of strikes us when we get to some of these examples in the real world. And so this is a great example here. Bühler is a Swiss company, agricultural facing. And I always love to use these kind of agricultural metaphors here, because when you think about how AI is helping you, how intelligent compute is helping you, this is one where it's a kind of an amazing thing to think through, right? It's like agriculture, the thing, farming, right? We've been doing it since the time of the Egyptians, right? We first cultivated wheat and flour and all of those pieces. How can technology really help you to be better with this? And so this is a really interesting one where we're thinking about AI here at the edge, and this is the intelligent edge. This machine combine harvester sitting here, right? This thing is in part of that intelligent edge. The same amount of compute that's sitting in your phone is sitting in these kinds of machines and then helping us with food safety. And so in this case, Bühler has a great example, because 65% of that world's grain, so the supply chain demands, the things we've seen out there, 65% of the world's grain is processed in the mills of this company. And every day about 2 billion people get food via this organization's solutions, right? And so if you think about it, if all these machines, right, they're connected into that intelligent edge, if all of these things like stopped working, like our global nutrition system, the planet would not be fed correctly, right, from this. And so it really collapsed in just a few days. And so there's kind of amazing challenges, even within something as basic and as needed as food. Food has an entire value chain that's associated with it, whether it's from the harvesting itself, it's understanding about food safety and how do we verify where food has come from, where is something has it gone through a value chain, has it gone through the safety process, can we source that particular area, how do we know what data comes with it? And just with the same way as we think about maybe tracking your packages with UPS and FedEx, oftentimes it's not just the object itself, it's actually getting data along with it as well. And the same thing is true for every grain of rice in the world, every grain of wheat in the world. We want to be able to actually attach and understand the data that's augmented around that too. And so this really interesting opportunity comes together when we think about things like health challenges inside of the universe, like what we're doing, thinking through like the immensity of that, of like how we're feeding planets, and how we think about, the data that's as part of this too. So in this case, I'll talk through just a couple of examples of like how we can think about this kind of technology and how it's powering what we're doing on that intelligent edge. And again, I'm giving extreme examples here because I think it's important to understand like these daily pieces of signals, this information that's getting processed is augmenting our whole lives, right? We think about our whole lives. It's not just about the computer that you're looking at right now. It's not just about what Microsoft Teams is doing and what SharePoint is doing. This is about how we process data, how we think about how AI can help us, and how that impacts in the rest of our lives too. So in this case, this is a food sorting mechanism. And so this machine here, you may not be familiar with this one, but it's a grain sorter effectively. And it's powered by a lot of computer vision technology here, because there are 500 million people that are at risk because there can be food safety issues on certain kinds of grains. There's a toxin, it's called aflatoxin, that can be part of a grain. And so we've trained computer vision systems in this case to actually pick out grains that look like they're affected. So it can help you to understand like that camera data that's coming in. It actually helps to sort the grain as part of this, and it reduces the risk of contamination as part of this. And so we're using things like cognitive services in Azure to be able to power this kind of machine. And so this helps people both at risk, right? People risk from cancer, contamination, and also helps us with food safety of the world. And so it's an extreme example of how AI can power an opportunity in something as in an industry that you might not, connect with being technology powered, but it's really amazing effect that it's having every day. And so I talk about this a lot, but every company is a software company, right? So you might have heard Satya Nadella, our CEO at Microsoft, talk about this. Every company is a software company. And it's very true. If you look at some of the huge changes that have happened over the last few years, whether it's, if you're old enough to remember Blockbuster, if you're not, I totally understand. But if you remember that there used to be stores where you went to get videos before Netflix was invented, there was a way to get, cabs or hotels and travel with Airbnb. And then there were these kind of, big retailers that were out there. So if you think about CompUSA, the things you might might be familiar with in the Western world, at least, understanding, those changes that have happened, and Amazon basically being able to rule the world in this case. And so half of the companies that were on the Fortune 500 list in 2000, so just 22 years ago, are now gone. So half of the companies that were the largest in the world are disappeared in the last 20 years. And they've been replaced basically by organizations that are delivering value faster, they're delivering value better and cheaper than those incumbents did. And if you look today at the Fortune 500, it's very much the same fate, right? If you look through the companies that are out there, you can see that the same thing has really been happening. And this is because software has really driven efficiency, right? Our productivity revolution that we've been in, software has been just making things go faster, right? Really just making things go faster. But as I mentioned earlier, it's really important to understand that the difference, the change that's happening in the world right now is not just about efficiency and productivity and going faster. This is about software driving differentiation for your business, for your organization, for the way that your business grows. And so you think about this, traditional companies in this case are being disrupted by modern companies that are basically software companies. They have physical objects associated with them. There's data around those physical objects that make it incredibly important. But in this case, it's one of those areas where software is driving that differentiation. It's the physical good is combined with data, making it easy to book something on Airbnb, making it easy for you to find a cab or transportation with Uber, or getting groceries delivered or whatever it is. Same thing with your entertainment needs, right? Or any of your physical product needs. One of the reasons these companies win is because software is driving that differentiation, the data that's packaged around this too. And you can see this being reflected into trends as well inside of organizations. And so you think about something as basic as cars. You think back to, Henry Ford way back in the 1920s and the Model T, right? And sort of productivity where you can have something in any color so long as it's black, right? And that's because those production line efficiencies were there, right? That assembly line has happened as part of this too. And so you look at kind of the role of how software has changed in automotive. So in this case, this is an American car company. So pick the largest companies there, and thinking through about 1% of the headcount of those car companies is generally developers, right? And so software developers also eating the world. If software is eating the world, then developers are eating the world too. And thinking through like that headcount piece. But if you look at Tesla, it's 6 times what there is in a traditional car company. And so that compute is happening on board. It's part of that intelligent edge. If you have an electric vehicle, there's a huge amount of compute that's happening as part of that. And then over time, obviously, as we get into self-driving as well, you can think about it as well. The way that physical good has been transformed, has been driven differentiation from the software that's on board and the way that it's getting produced as well. So it's just really interesting stuff, right, to think through, like, what do these big trends mean for us too? It means that every company is not just a software company, it really is an AI company. And so when you think about AI, what are sort of the opportunities that we have here? There's kind of areas where you think about learning, how we can learn from those trillions and trillions of signals that are coming and being processed, whether it's in physical goods or whether it's part of collaboration data every day. We think about how we can look at perception. Can we use touch? Can we use data? Can we use voice? Can we use vision to help us with perception and understanding those areas? And then there's finally this cognition, right? And understanding how we can drive insights from all of that data. What compute can we do? How can we augment what people are doing? How can we empower people to get insights from the data that they're seeing as well? And so if you're in this kind of second revolution, as I think about it from AI perspective here, AI really is for everyone, right? If you think about this, it's like startups, it's the SMBs, it's individuals as part of this too. And we've got this kind of ubiquitous computing that's happening. AI is coming to things. So everything that you have, right, it becomes better, it becomes stronger when you have some data around it. And so it's really interesting to augment, whether it's everything from those agricultural machines to what you're doing every day, to the mobile devices that you're using, to the assistants that you might have in your home, and then think about how we're adding data on top of that. And then we've got things like augmented intelligence in this case, like how can we help about co-reasoning? How can we think about immersive experiences too? And so we want to use, again, AI as that power as well. And that's great. You say, hey, that's awesome, Naomi. That's amazing. We've got all this data. We've got this technology that's happening as well. But it's really all about us, right? In the end, this is really about every company that I ever talk to is a people company. We say our differentiation comes from people oftentimes in our organizations. Your company missions, the organizations you work for, whether it's you yourself or you're working at a 100,000 person company, every company is a people company as part of this. And so we need to have learning for people, just the same way as we do for technologies. We want to think about how we perceive the world, whether we're including things like diverse opinions and inclusion as part of that, and how we're helping to compute things better. So what's our cognitive load ourselves as people, but we also want to think about how we're bringing in that new data as part of that. And so these same categories of things that we think about from an AI perspective also mean that we're looking at this from a people perspective too. And one of the quotes I love the most here is one that came from Peter Drucker. He wrote this many years ago, and he just continues to just be so right. It's just kind of amazing. And so in this case, the basic economic resource, the means of production, right, the means of things that powers our entire global economy. It's no longer about capital. It's no longer about money or natural resources, which is many where the companies of the past have come from, nor even the labor that's part of it. It is, and it always will be, knowledge, right? And so thinking through what that means for you, what does that knowledge mean for you? It's the knowledge that's in your head right now. It's the collective understanding we have with our other human beings, but it's also important to have the AI piece of this too, right? How do we help you to augment this and empower this as part of the work too? So that leads me to a couple of different things that need to happen as part of this. And so thinking about, responsible AI in this case. So one of the areas that we work hard on at Microsoft, and you may have seen in many of the different products that we have, is really thinking through what responsible AI means, right? We don't want AI with bias in it, right? We want it to be transparent. We want it to be accountable. We want it to be inclusive as part of it as well. And we need it to have a sense of fairness in there too. And so this is not about, this is not about moralistic judgment on anything. This is about how we embody a little bit of ethics and put responsibility into the technologies that we're using. And that means, the data sets that we're using to train on, for example, making sure that they are representative of the world at large, that we can understand and predictably understand the results that come out of this, and that we have reliability and safety built into these different areas. And so I want to transition and talk about how we're helping a lot of this AI technologies and how you're seeing it manifested in the collaboration world that we're in right now, and thinking through how some of the work that's happening and these big macroeconomic trends, things that are happening generally in the world, and how that affects us on a daily basis. So I've got some work here that we've been talking through. The new future of work, as I mentioned, is a big study that's going on. Microsoft just released about a month ago or so. It's like 120 pages of remote, interesting hybrid concepts, whether you talk about organizations, talk about teams, talk about individuals, what it means for the world at large. And so I've chosen a couple of highlights that come out of this to help you understand a little bit more about, how your day might be different because of these technologies and how we're helping to empower us as part of this. So the first one is oftentimes, as we said, we've been in this global experiment for the last 2 years to prove that people could actually be productive and amazing at home. And so in this case, remote working, has been a big grand experiment. But there's been kind of good news and bad news with it, right? And so it's really thinking through, like, we've helped to really level the playing field. We think about people maybe that had limited mobility for all kinds of reasons, whether it was something physical or just because of the access to transportation. But we've also thinking through, like, what does this mean, right? People with different abilities in this case, maybe thinking about temporary disability in this case. And so the other part of this is it's actually really hard for people with different types of conditions to be included in meetings as well. And so for some folks, I've had folks that are on my team where if you had maybe an auditory issue, being on Teams has been really, really productive. You can have transcription that's happening as part of it. Only one person generally talks at a time, so that really helps you if you have an auditory issue. But at the same time, it might be overwhelming as an experience, right? If you have a neurodiverse condition where there's just too many people up on the screen, maybe there's just too many things to look at, it can be really difficult. And then we've got other things like maybe, hey, more junior in the organization, so you feel less comfortable, speaking up inside of these video meetings as well. And so I wanted to show a couple of examples of things that really need to happen inside of maybe your daily work, and understand like how those technology can actually help you to be more productive because of that. The first one I wanted to show is that, creating space in this case inside of Outlook is really important. Your brain needs a break, and I've links to the research as part of this too. And so when you think about, we have meetings that are going on, it seems like for days, right? You're in the virtual marathon right now. It's important to have those 5-minute breaks in between the sessions. Why? Because you need cognitive time, right? You need cognitive time to actually go through and process some things. Maybe you need to, take care of other physical needs, but it's the cognition is really important, and your brain can't process that stuff continuously. We can't sit in 8 hours of meetings continuously with context switching and everything else. You need to give your brain a little break in between things so that you will actually process much more efficiently. And so just like we might look after a machine or understand that your computer is busy, oftentimes we don't think about the big computer that we have sitting inside of our heads. And so one of the things that you can do in Outlook, and I would heartily recommend this, is inside of Outlook you can actually change your default to say, hey, I want to start my meetings 5 minutes later, or stop them 5 minutes earlier, or whatever works inside of your company and for your work. But in this case, we actually want to be able to take a break, right? Make sure that you're taking the length of break in this case, and we can take a 5-minute break, and then understanding that the employees then you yourself and other folks that you're working with can easily get something that's time adjusted based on that. And this is something that you should do inside of your organization. It will help you be more productive, even though it doesn't seem that way and you use the time all the way up to the end of the meeting. Taking that 5 minutes will improve your cognition all the way through the rest of your day and make you more present at work and be able to focus on the things that are important to you. Another couple things that I wanted to mention as part of this. So thinking about how we help with effective and inclusive meetings in this case. And so looking at different areas, for example, inside of Teams, there's actually a great set of features. You may have gotten a query that comes up afterwards that says, hey, how effective was this meeting? And so that effective score is not about rating the technology or what it's doing. One of the things that you can do as part of that is actually give feedback to the meeting organizer about how effective the meeting was. And I'm picking on meetings because we spend a lot of time in meetings, right? We always feel like we're in meetings. It's like we always have to have meetings to have that collaboration and sense of communities. And so let's pick on meetings as part of this, right? And so how do we have more effective meetings? Send that feedback to the meeting organizer, right? There's that box on Teams is there for a reason. It helps when you have agendas. It helps when you use hand raising. It helps when you use moderators for questions that are coming into the chat. And so this meeting coach can actually be part of this. And so it both helps you understand a little bit about how individuals and groups are interacting, but it can also understand if people are speaking over each other, what kinds of things that you might want to implement to make it better in your next meeting as well. The other piece of this is just understanding, with people with different abilities in this case. So how can we help you to focus on what's important? And so, for example, I know right now I'm going to be spotlight is literally on me. So that spotlight feature inside of Teams is one of the ways that we can help you to narrow your focus and attention. So you're not getting worried by the other, 90 other people that are in this room right now and what they're doing. And you all could be multitasking in the background. You might be doing a lot of different things. But that basically, that way of being able to hone in, maybe you just want to focus on the content. That's a little setting that you can have in Teams as well. Maybe seeing people's faces are distracting. You just want to analyze and see what's on the screen. So you can actually just focus on what's important for you. Maybe the active speaker is being highlighted as part of that too. And then it helps you to understand, like, I can control the amount of stuff I have to look at on the screen, so I can use the cognitive ability that I need as part of that too. And then the last piece on this is whiteboarding. So whiteboarding is the thing that's probably been the hardest, right, inside of these remote work environments that we've had. And so we've things like content types that have been added as part of this too. Maybe doing things like following, doing attribution, content control. So when you have done some scratchings on the whiteboard and they get subsequently used in other areas, those are an important piece of this too. Okay, so a couple of things on that area. The other piece that I wanted to mention to you that you might not have noticed, this is something that's been out for probably a year or so in Outlook too, but this is another area where we've actually been augmenting a lot of the insights that you get as part of this. And so we want to help you to focus, right? Focus and connect the dots between different things inside of an organization as well. And so one of the areas you can look at, this is available on Outlook on the web as well as I think on Outlook on the desktop, but meeting insights is actually a whole set of work that goes into understanding understanding the meeting that you have, and then trying to pull in various interesting things, whether it's email, whether it's the files that are associated with the same kinds of people, and help you to actually bring that content forward. So you're not hunting right before the meeting for the deck or something you were supposed to have done a pre-read for. And so if you open up a meeting, oftentimes you'll get these meeting insights, and you'll see that as part of your daily work. And this is something I really recommend having a look at, and also giving us feedback on it too, to understand a little bit more about the files that are available there, see what the emails that are associated, and helping to sort of bring together all the different assets for you automatically on behalf of that too. Now, one of the areas I wanted to talk about is understanding that, collaboration itself with all the tools that we have. This is a great quote that came from one of our folks in Microsoft Research here, that we want to think about collaboratively, we want to think about collaboration with deliberation. And so in this case, thoughtless collaboration is always going to be poor collaboration. It doesn't matter how good the technology is, right? So I think about collaboration with deliberation. And so in this case, like, we want to use these tools. There's some great stuff that's put into Teams, into SharePoint, into Yammer, all of these things. This collaboration nature is part of this, but we really want to go and overcome some of the tech as well. So let me talk about a couple of other things that have come through as part of this research. And so thinking through, about how we build and maintain relationships, right? People, we need that human connection right now, right? I can see all of you in my head, at least, that I can see the folks that I know very well that are on the phone. And thinking through, understanding, how we help to build those relationships, especially in this kind of remote or hybrid work situation that we're in right now. And so you see some couple of switches here, because understanding, this case, we've got reports in this case that lower connection to colleagues is actually a barrier within remote work. If you don't feel connected to the people, the team that you're working with, it's actually really hard for you to actually think about being productive at work. And then you've got to think about this. This is data that came from Glint last year. We want to think about, is there more that technology can do to help facilitate that connection as well? And so this is kind of the two big areas that we think about how we help to build and maintain those relationships, and thinking through how we can help that too. Now, of course, I've got to talk about knowledge because, Viva Topics, it's my baby. But I think about this. This is not, technology that we're using in Viva Topics that's available from Azure Cognitive Services as part of this. We also want to think about how we're helping to understand how people are connected to knowledge inside of your organization. And so thinking through that, like knowledge and indexing and how it's available to you inside of your organization. Now, in this case, I think about people and AI coming together, and I talk about oftentimes a robot intern, right? I think about Viva Topics as kind of a small army of robot interns, or an effective robot intern by itself, I guess. But in this case, I think about it as a small army of robot interns. If it could come through and actually understand, like, hey, I want to be able to go and understand, like, all of the information that's on my intranet. If something could just read through everything I have, right, inside of my intranet, and at least take the first cut at what topics might be there. And so that's one of the things we do with Viva Topics, right? We generate lots and lots of topics based on the content that's already there as well. And so one of these areas where we're producing a lot of this content is says, hey, I just want to look through the corpus of the whole of my organization and give that first draft of a topic. And so that people and AI coming together is such an important piece of this. It's one of the big directions we have for, augmentation of people, because I want something to take the first draft for me. It's much easier for me as a person to just react to a first draft, even if it's something that I'm subject matter expert on. If I'm presented with a blank canvas and it says, hey, Naomi, write everything you know about AI on there, it's really difficult, right? But if something is at least taken a first draft of it, I can go in, I can edit it and say, oh, AI, you're totally wrong on some of this, but that's okay, that's cool. But I want to be able to go through and be able to edit that, and it's just a much faster process. And goodness knows we're all busy enough at work as it is, right? And so in this case, we're thinking about how we're bringing together these different types of AI to actually augment what we do. So in the, for example, the highlighting that happens automatically, this happens now inside of SharePoint, it happens inside of Outlook on the web, it's coming into Yammer and into Teams as well. And so we actually have a lot of content sensitive mentions that are happening there. We actually look through all the content. We try not to spam you with lots of highlights as part of it. So we actually look for the first good mention, if you will, of a topic on a page before we highlight it automatically. We try not to, show it like 20 times if that same term appears on the page. We actually do a lot of work to understand that. And then you can see the types of AI that we're using behind the scenes, right? So to provide things like topic identification, topic conflation as part of this, we've got acronyms and alternate name extractions. And these are all different AI technologies that are powering behind the scenes. For us as humans, we instinctively understand, right, the difference between these things, right? What's a topic? How do I identify what's a different name to it? What's the definition? Maybe I've extracted that from the document as well. I think about the related people. We want to solve for some of that connectedness inside of the organization, and then thinking through related documents as well. And for us as people, that seems like a really simple task, right? Behind the scenes, huge amount of AI, liquid nitrogen powered servers that have to go to work on this stuff with 10 different types of AI that we have to use to bring this together to see what, you know, maybe just an intern would be able to produce about a topic. And one of the areas that we're bringing very soon on this is actually topic relatedness. And so you've seen us do some of the maps already that help you to understand how things are connected in your organization from a topics perspective. We're bringing those suggested topics to life as well. So that's rolling out right now. And then we're even doing a whole bunch of work behind the scenes to understand deeper relationships between those topics. And so we're looking at people, we're looking at documents as part of this, and how we can help to infer relationships between them too. So really exciting stuff that's coming as part of this. The other piece that I want to just mention quickly on this slide as well is seeing here that we've got this thing around a definition. So in this case, it says, you know, Contoso Electronics about this particular project. You can see where that definition came from, right? So we see very clearly on this from this goals and outcomes document. And the reason we do this is going back to our responsible AI principles, right? We want it to be transparent where we're sourcing this information from. It's not that just AI just made it up and it did some summarization by itself, but we actually want to say, hey, this is where we extracted this information. It builds trust with you, right? It builds trust with you to understand where things came from. Same thing is true on the suggested people and the suggested resources. Again, because AI took the first draft of this particular topic. And so you can see here, it says contributed to many resources. That's why that person was associated with this. It's not because we're inferring that, in this case, Miguel is an expert on this particular project. It's because Miguel has signals in the Microsoft Graph that tell us, right, that he's actually working on these particular resources and that he's probably got something to do with this topic. Same thing is true on those resources themselves. So in this case, you can see that the topic has been mentioned several times inside of those documents. So every time we show you something, we're trying to give you an explanation because of it as well. So just a really important piece of work that's going on there, how we're thinking about that augmentation and bringing it to life essentially in the experiences you're having with Viva Topics right now. And so when you think about this helps us also to understand, you know, the topic cards themselves. We want to get you involved, right? We want to have humans in the loop. We want to think about how we're helping to empower you to do contribution of the knowledge that you have too. Because if everybody contributes inside of that organization, you can all basically build on the work of giants, right? And sort of stand on that shoulder, be able to understand how to take work forward and be able to understand how to access the knowledge of your organization. And so you see here a couple of different areas where we've invested in this. So that feedback mechanism that happens on the bottom of the topic cards, in this case, we can actually use it to help crowdsource whether a topic is valid or not. And we want to just get your input very quickly on, like, is it something that's easy to do? And so in this case, we want to have that simple yes, no to say, is this really a valid topic? Is this something we found as part of this? And then the other piece of this is understanding a little bit more about, you know, what kinds of questions we're asking you. So we want to help you to have loops in this case to think about feedback versus whether we're helping to disambiguate something. So if you've already interacted with one of these feedback mechanisms, you're going to get questions and say, hey, you know, does this also have this connection to this particular area? Is this resource a relevant one for this? Are you a good subject matter expert to have included as part of these people, right? We want to have that control and that relationship, and so that you trust the AI that's going on, but also that you're contributing your expertise in very lightweight ways as well. Now, one of the areas that we've brought this into has been in Outlook on the web. And I'm going to see, hopefully this demo actually plays. My slides are stuck, I apologize. But I have a little demo here. We'll see if it actually comes and plays for me. We'll see. Let's see if it loads up. I think it's been taking a little bit of time here. But in this case, it is generally available, Viva Topics in Outlook on the web. Let's see if this will do. It'd be nice if it would play for me. So
it's playing on our side, Naomi.
Oh, it is? Okay, just not for me. Never mind. That's great. That's working for you guys. Awesome. Thank you. So yes, Jack, it's coming to Teams as well. So yes, in this case for Outlook on the web, if you click on the thing, maybe it'll play for you. So in this case, you can see that we can very easily basically bring more context to life inside of your emails. And so there's two things that's happening. One is if I, as a subject matter expert, have taken 10 minutes or something like that to curate a topic page. Maybe I've got something that's about the project that I work on every day. And oftentimes you get the same like a zillion questions, right? About who should I be working with on your team? What are some of the introduction materials that I need to know about as part of your project? How can I connect to other people that are aware of this? And how does this work with this other project and have the context around it? If you get questions like that every day or every week, think about curating a topic page for that particular area, whether it's a project, it's something that you're working on right now, or a particular area where you need to contribute, because it's an easy way for you to transmit that information as a subject matter expert. Just saying hashtag, project name really allows you to basically say less, right? You don't have to answer all of those questions and then mean more for what you need for topics. And so it's an easy way to transmit that information to other people who just need to know how to connect to things, understand the resources that are available, how does the context of this particular project fit with other things. And so it's a great way to use Viva Topics. The other part of this, as you can see on the demo as well, is that it'll actually help to identify topics that are already available in the knowledge base of your company. So when you're reading one of those giant threads and you got forwarded something, you're like, I have no idea what this is. Like, you're like, oh my goodness, it's like 20 levels deep on the emails, and you're like scrolling to the beginning, but no, in fact, the questions that are really important are halfway through. Like, Viva Topics will help to identify those things automatically for you as well. So it gives you context really quickly, right? Or if you're not sure what that acronym means, hey, that's a good way to be able to sneak a peek at it and see the topic card as part of that. And so we want to see that area where, again, you're saying less in these emails, you're saying less, but you mean more by saying and understanding the context of what's going on in the email faster. And that helps us with our cognitive load, right? As humans, if we can just quickly process this information, quickly get a sense of context what this is, it helps you to be able to do more as well. So all of this good stuff, this is available, as I said, with Viva Topics right now in Outlook on the web. We are bringing to Teams and Yammer. We're doing a bunch of really exciting stuff with Yammer that we're powering all of the topics behind the scenes. Topics has been in Yammer for quite a long time from a legacy perspective, but now we're bringing that same experience, that same Viva Topics experience to all of the topics that you have in Yammer. So think about it as kind of a crowdsourcing mechanism that's already existing in communities, and then we'll be able to supercharge all of that with Viva Topics and make it available across Microsoft 365. I want to think about this consistently so we can use topics in wherever you happen to be productive. So if you're a person that lives in Outlook, if you're a person that lives in Teams, if you live in Yammer, wherever you happen to be, SharePoint, all of the different applications that you use in Microsoft 365, we're going to bring this notion of topics so we can get context quickly, so you can share understanding, you can share knowledge as part of this, and have that connection basically to your colleagues, as well as being able to have the cognitive load that it takes to process all of this information, have it available, and have it anticipate what it is that you need as part of these threads or conversations that are going on. All right, folks, I'm going to wrap there because I know that was a lot of stuff. Hopefully that was super useful for you to understand. I would encourage you, I've left the link in here to understand more. There's, like I said, about 120 pages or so that came out of the New Future of Work study. It's a ton of amazing research and insights that are in there. I'll leave you with that link on the screen. I'm happy to try to take some questions in the chat as well and think through a little bit of that. But hopefully it gave you a good sense of what we're seeing out in the big trends in the world, what's happening. AI is kind of that new area, software driving differentiation into our global economy, into our organizations, and then how we're helping AI be part of that augmentation and assistance to humans, and how we're helping us to be more effective because of it. So thank you so very much, folks. I really, really appreciate it. It was great being able to talk with you all today. I am going to check in the chat as well. and see. Let's see. Serge says, yes, the link should be clickable. That's why I'm using PowerPoint Live. Awesome. Be able to be a part of that. I appreciate all the applause. Thank you. Christine, can you tell Microsoft its customers are going through a lot of frustration because of the renaming of products? Okay, sorry. I'm sorry. That is a cognitive load issue right there. So we totally understand that. But thanks for mentioning it. Happy to take any other questions as well. Thanks so much. Thank you, Andre. Merci, Serge. Always a pleasure to see you. Good. All right, folks, hopefully that was a good wrap, and I will wrap it up there then. And I wish you an amazing rest of the virtual marathon. Remember, take breaks. It's important. Pace yourselves and take those 5 minutes in between so you can process for the next things too. Thanks so much.